Hi, thanks for tuning in today to Front Porch Conversations here at Advent Christian Village. Today we're at the Harmony Center in front of the fireplace. We don't quite need it, but it's going to rain soon and we'll be ready. I want to welcome our guest today, Bruce Strickland. Bruce, thank you so much for joining us.
You're welcome. It's a pleasure.
It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you.
I know that our viewers will like to know a little more about you, and please let us know where you were born and a little bit about your early childhood.
Okay, I was born in Portland, Maine, and when I was 8 years old, we moved to Auburndale, Massachusetts, just outside of Boston. Mm-hmm. My father was directed to start the first Christian bookstore in New England, which he did on Park Street, right up the way from Park Street Church. Unfortunately, he did not do his homework beforehand, and so the village in which we moved was divided exactly in half by the railroad tracks. Half of the village was Catholic and half of it was Protestant. We lived on the Catholic side. And so I was in a public school there that had been there for 82 years and had never had a Protestant student in the school in all that time.
It's always good to be a trailblazer, right?
Oh, yes.
But it didn't have the most positive effect initially.
The hook there was the fact that if there was even one Protestant student in the school, then the class didn't get out at 3 o'clock so the students could go to confession. It didn't go out until 3:30. And so that meant that not only did the students hate me, the teachers did too. So I got beaten up every night on my way home from school the first 3 months we were there.
That must have been a hard thing to go through as a young person.
It was, yes.
And what age were you?
8.
How did that change? Or how did that change you?
Well, we went from being kind of collecting house for all the relatives to being just completely by ourselves. My sister went off to college, and then when the Second World War intervened, and we didn't get back to Maine for 4 years, and so I had to learn to make friends and be on my own person.
You told me that one of the ways you thought that was accomplished was through storytelling.
Yes, I had a very wise teacher who recognized the fact that I could tell a story well. So I did book reviews in the morning at the beginning of the class day. And that enabled me to get in connection with my classmates, and they finally decided that I was a human being after all.
Well, I've known that for a long time.
Thank you.
Tell us about the rest of your educational life.
Okay, I was in the second graduating class from what was then Boston Christian High School. My mother taught there, had been teaching there a year before I went, and had some wonderful friends there. It was a great experience. It is now Lexington Christian Academy, which I could not afford to attend. And we traveled by train and subway to get to school every day and back home. And then I graduated from Wheaton College in Illinois, and from Gordon Conwell Theological Seminary in Hamilton, Massachusetts. And I have taken graduate school studies at Western Seminary in Portland, Oregon, and Phoenix Seminary in Arizona.
Well, that's quite an educational life. And did you receive a doctorate?
No,
No,
I have a master's degree.
But during those years, did you form friendships that are still important to you?
Still there. My college roommate and I continue to connect with each other. Both of us lost our wives about the same time, so we have a real connection there.
Where does he live?
He lives in Arizona.
Well, both of you got to warmer climates.
Yes.
I think you told me your sister was approximately 10 years older than you.
Yes.
So you sort of grew up as an only child in some ways.
Well, I did and I didn't. My sister was a real presence in our home, even though she was away. And we kept in contact all through our adult life. I just worshiped the ground she walked on. She was always just sis to me.
That's a wonderful memory.
It was.
Tell us a little bit about your parents.
My father was superintendent of the Maine Bible Society. He had to leave college in the middle of his sophomore year because his father was killed by a train, and he had to go home and support his mother and younger brother because his mother had no marketing skills. My mother was the daughter of a Baptist minister, and they met at a wedding reception where my father played the piano, and in the church where my grandfather was pastor. So my mother had a master's degree, and my father had just that year and a half of college, and it always bugged him, I think, that he had less education than she did. But they were very good parents to me and set a good example in a Christian home.
Well, it sounds like you were steeped in a Christian environment for all of your life.
All my life, yes.
Tell us about your wife, Jean, and where you met.
All right, we met at Wheaton College. I was a sophomore and she was a freshman. And I had just come off a dating relationship that ended badly for me. So I wasn't ready for anything else, but we became friends. And over the course of time, we became engaged, and then she left Wheaton to go to Columbia University in New York to be a physical therapist. So for the 2 years we were engaged, we saw each other a total of 49 days. And fortunately, airmail stamps only cost 6 cents at that time. So we wrote every single day, because we said if we're going to live together for the rest of our lives, we need to be in contact every day. So she graduated from Columbia, and we were married in 1956. And we're married for 55 years.
And I gathered that was 55 wonderful years. Or was it 56?
And possibly good. You know, anyone that would live with me for half a century has got to be a splendid person, and she was.
I was fascinated when you were mentioning to me that she went to physical therapy programs, and that was fairly a new career opportunity, wasn't it?
Well, in 1955 in eastern Massachusetts, there were 3,500 polio cases. So they expanded the physical therapy department at Mass General, and that enabled her to get a job there. We lived in Salem, and so she took the train into North Station every day and worked there for 2 years.
Did she continue working in that field after?
She got a job in Salem with a local doctor, and she then had to go to homes to give the treatments over there. But eventually came to the place where he couldn't pay her anymore. And so for 4 months, we lived on the $25 a week I was making at my pastoral job and nothing else. And our apartment cost us, wait for it, $75 a month.
Wow. I can't even imagine.
No, well, it's hard to believe that. That was another life, really.
Right. And then I know you have children.
Yes, we have twin daughters. Lynn is a widow and lives in St. Petersburg. She has one son who is married and just a new father. And her twin sister Martha, who is a professor at Penn State University in Harrisburg. And then 7 years later we had a son who lives in Pennsylvania.
And I understand you're a grandfather and about to be a great-grandfather?
I am a great-grandfather.
Oh, that's right.
As of last October. And another one on the way in August from another section of the family.
I understand that you and your daughters stay in touch and your son a lot. And how have you done that, particularly during the pandemic?
Well, ever since we moved to Dowling Park, which is in 2006, I have to call Lynn every morning to let her know that I survived the night. And then she calls every night. And I email Martha every morning and talk to Bob once a week on the phone.
Well, and have you not had a face-to-face with them during this time?
I saw Lynn at Thanksgiving time.
Oh, good.
I have not seen Martha since a year ago, August.
Well, I know we'll all be happy when we can have a chance to see face-to-face with our families.
Will it ever be back to normal again? I don't know.
Well, maybe just face-to-face will be a good start.
That's right, that would.
Where you can share a hug and watch the person's expressions.
That's right. That's right. Well, we use FaceTime too. That
good.
helps, too.
Okay, that does help.
Yes, it does.
And I'm getting to watch my grandchildren in Michigan grow up through video calls, and
yeah, that's
so
nice.
technology has been a big blessing
Yes,
in a
that's
lot of
true.
ways. Sometimes a little challenge, but
Yeah, well, it has pros and cons to it, as everything does.
it does. When at some point you moved to Florida, tell us about that.
I had been at the church in Illinois for 10 years, and it seemed as if it was time to move on. And I had several other pastoral opportunities that did not work out. So one of the things we had done in Illinois was to have on Tuesday night what we called a rap session. And we had high school young people come in, sit on the floor, because we found sitting in chairs didn't work. Sit on the floor, and it was open to everything. We talked about everything. Sometimes it was heavy theology, sometimes it was the Cubs. But the headmaster at Keswick Christian School in St. Petersburg, his two children were in that group when he was one of the elders of the church there. And I wrote to him and said, you know, this is where I am, and I've just contacted 10 other people I've known in my lifetime what to do next. And they said, your family comes first. So he said, well, I always thought you'd wind up in a seminary, but he said, if you want to come and teach high school, it's fine with me. So I took a 2/3 cut in salary and came to St. Pete. My son was going into 8th grade, and he had been a pulmonary cripple ever since he was born. He had pneumonia 26 times.
Wow.
And missed huge chunks of school and so forth. In the 5 years that he was in school there at Keswick, he missed 2.5 days.
Wow.
So moving to Florida was the best therapy that he could possibly have. In fact, he has no trouble now at all.
That's wonderful.
Yes, it was a blessing in many, many different ways. I had a great 22 years there at Keswick. They had never had a Bible teacher there before, so that was a whole new experience for everyone.
You were talking with me about some of the comments you had from students about your teaching and about what that meant to them in their life.
Well, they appear on Facebook every once in a while, and several of them have said, I still have my Romans notes, and they've been very supportive. When Jean died, I got notes from literally hundreds of them about how much they remembered her.
And I had a conversation with a couple who've recently moved here, and one of the things they told me was what surprised them the most about moving to Advent Christian Village was knowing you were here. They didn't know that, and you had taught their children.
I taught one of their daughters, yes. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It is a small world, and our paths intersect often.
Well, in the Christian world, it is small because you can find anyone, anywhere. When Martha was overseas for language school in France, we went to church with her on the Sunday that we were there. And it was all in French, of course. And I knew about 5 sentences in French, and that was it. But the fellowship that was there was in the spirit, and no doubt about it.
How did you learn about Advent Christian Village?
We were friends with the Strumbecks, and Ron suddenly became blind, and so Rosa was looking for a place that could be of help to them. And her cousin Roy Ames lives here,
Right.
So she came up here, and she knew we were looking too. And so when she came home, she said to Jean, I think I found the place. So I came up here very wary because I've heard terrible stories about retirement villages and things like that. And having been in pastoral ministry and teaching, the amount of money I had saved away was not huge. My son wanted us to move up near him. It required a $300,000 down payment, non-refundable. And I said to him, how long have you known me, and where do you think I'm hiding all this gold? But anyway, we came up here, and Martha came rushing down to defend us, to think that we were going to be stolen blind. And she said, it's the place. And it has been.
And I know for a number of years, retirement communities were the model that give us all your money and move in, and
Yeah,
we'll
that's
take.
right.
And then many of them went bankrupt.
That's right.
But Florida has done a good job, I think, through the years in the legislature in that area that protects people who've made those investments much better than they were. So.
Well, before I was disabled, I did tours, and I used to say to the people in the tour that, to my knowledge, no one's ever been thrown out of the village because of a lack of funds.
No. And that was one of the things that drew me to this village as an employee, was knowing that that was the mission and how it was carried out.
That's right.
Bruce, I know that you have grown up in the church, and you would, how would you define a moment when you knew that it was life-changing for you?
I don't remember my grandfather because he died when I was 2 years old, but the stories of his pastoral ministry circulated in the family all the time. So when I was 10 years old, we were in a church where I was the only person of my age in the church. And I would come home after church service on Sunday morning and preach in the bedroom. And I said, that's for me.
Mm-hmm. And you never diverted from that thought?
Well, the teaching of Bible in Keswick Christian School was really an extension of pastoral ministry, because now I have the same congregation every day, not just once a week. Mm-hmm. And furthermore, I can give them tests to see if they're learning anything. So I don't consider myself having left the ministry. I just left pastoral ministry for a teaching ministry.
Oh, I was thinking more during your whole educational process and all, you've still always felt the call, is that right?
I always felt the call, and it worked to my advantage because I was in college during the Korean War. And so I got a deferment because I was going to seminary. Otherwise, I'd been one of the people on the History Channel.
Mm-hmm. Of the things that the village, I know you are involved in doing a Christian education class. Mm-hmm. Would you share a little bit about that class with us?
Tim Setzer was after me for some time to teach. And after Jean's death, I couldn't do it. I couldn't focus enough. But after a year and a half, I thought I was ready for something that was scheduled, had to be done, and so forth. And so I took the class from Tim Goyette, who had taught there for 9 years. And I just do inductive study, which is verse by verse. And we've managed to get along quite well on that. It takes time. You know, some people say, is this all there is? But yes, that's all there is. I let the Bible speak for itself. And
we were talking about your study of language and as an aid to helping you.
Yes, I had good advice before I went off to college. So I took Greek in college and Hebrew in seminary. I only had 1 year of Hebrew because the Hebrew professor said, 1 year will give you enough ability to handle a lexicon. If you want to really know the language, it's going to take you 10 years. Well, I didn't have 10 years, mm-hmm. so. But I do use the Hebrew in the lexicon, that's like a dictionary. Mm-hmm. And in teaching and preaching from the New Testament, I always do the Greek first.
And you then also talked about volunteering as a guide, a tour guide for the village.
Yes. Well, I also worked in the library here, not the
Oh, that's right.
One,
mm-hmm. The village library.
And I did that because Jean did that. That was something that she could do. She was capable of doing because she couldn't move around very easily. Mm-hmm. So when she died, I said, I'm going to take her place. And so I've done that until they closed the library off. I lost my job.
Bruce, would you give us an example of your storytelling?
Okay. I would say that one of the things that I remember most especially was my father's last illness. He had a heart attack when he was only 60, and so he was living on borrowed time. But during that year, I had numerous opportunities to be with him. And I found out some things about him that I never knew before. For one thing, he was a concert pianist. We had a piano in our home my whole growing up years. My sister and I took lessons. My father never played the piano. That's how he and my mother met, because he played for a wedding reception, and she was the daughter of the minister who was officiating at the ceremony, and so they met there, and the rest was history. But the year that we spent between his heart attack and his death, that was so great, because my father very seldom said anything at home. My mother was the talker. And it was good for me to talk with him at that time, knowing that we had only a little time left.
And also you shared with me a story about your health at one point and how a doctor...
Oh, okay. Well, I had a heart attack in 2001. That's a story in itself. But I had triple bypass surgery. And the cardiologist said, this is good for 10 years. Well, it's been 20 now, so I'm past on that. But it was interesting because he said, if you will do what I tell you to do, you should have a productive life. He died at age 44 of a heart attack, naturally.
But you're good proof of his work and his advice.
Yes, yes. Yeah, I did. In fact, he was very good at telling me what was going to happen. Because after I came out of the anesthesia, I said to the nurse, this is like having a pre-death autopsy, because there was so much pain that was involved. But he told me, this is what you will feel the first day, this is what you'll be like on day 3, mm-hmm. This is what will happen in a week when you go home, and this is how long it will take. And there was a time when I said, if I can ever walk down to the end of the driveway to get the mail, that would be a great step in the right direction. And yet, here I am.
Mm-hmm. Lots of steps since
Lots
then.
of steps, yes. But no steps, no stairs, really. That's good.
Yes. I go somewhere now and there's steps, and I'm like, really? We have to go up steps? That's one of the wonderful things to me about
right.
the village. They're not steps.
Or actually have to open the door.
Oh, yeah. Bruce, if you were to give advice to a young person today, what would it be?
First of all, the most important thing that anyone has is what he believes about God. So you have to get your relationship with Christ right first before you plan to do anything else. And maintain that. This is not something that just goes on by itself. This is a maintenance situation where you deliberately choose every day to put yourself at his service. And then I would say, take more time in the study of Scripture. Well, actually, my seminary professor said, take 10 times as much time to study Scripture as you do in books about the Scriptures. And it's hard to find Bible studies that are real Bible studies. Mm-hmm. They're usually someone's book and quotations from this one and that one and the other one. But this is God's Word. And this is what he says to us, and this is what we need to know. And so that becomes a priority over everything else. And it's so wonderfully fulfilling. Because I grew up in a very legalistic home, mm-hmm. where if you did anything wrong, you'd be punished for it. And so beginning at age 12, I had what became known as tonsillitis then, every 8 weeks until I was 29, just as regular as clockwork. And in my home, that meant that I had done something wrong. And so every time I got sick, it was search your life to see what's wrong with you. That was a terrible way to live. Mm-hmm. It wasn't until I was 35 years of age that Scripture showed to me, it's done. The punishment has been taken. You're free of debt. You don't owe your sinful nature anything. Wonderful relief to me.
And that has changed your life in a lot of ways, hasn't it?
Absolutely. It changed ministry because now it was all a very positive message. You know, now that you are a believer, this is where you are. This is what it's like. This is how you do it. We're using Proverbs in the class right now. And I'm saying this is like being on the interstate and watching mile markers go by. And so Proverbs is a group of unrelated statements, but they have impact in and of themselves. In fact, my niece, who was a missionary in Africa for 40 years,
Wow.
she said, I can't imagine teaching Proverbs any way but topically. And I said, well, come when the pandemic is over, you'll find out how it can be done. So I would say, start with that. If you're going to get married, be sure that you and your partner are on the same page spiritually. No faking here. It has to be the real thing. Otherwise, don't do it. It's better to be single than to have a bad marriage. And so my unmarried daughter, Martha, in Pennsylvania, she had 2 or 3 opportunities with young men that she was interested in, but they did not have the same goals in life that she did. And so she has remained single all of her lifetime.
We had the conversation the other day about Proverbs, and I said, and who was one of your favorite writers? And you said C.S. Lewis.
Yes.
And that's the way I can understand C.S. Lewis best.
Yes.
Is a short little message a day rather than a whole book of his.
Well, yes, there are some books that require a lifetime, basically.
That's right.
But I've given away hundreds of copies of Mere Christianity because it is the best apologetic for Christianity that I know. And that's the one that's easy to understand.
Mm-hmm.
Problem of pain, different story.
That's right. When I get through the 365 days with C.S. Lewis book, I'm going to try some of the others I've read before that I never could get through.
But start with Mere Christianity, and then
I have read that, but I'm ready to reread it again.
Screwtape Letters.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Do you still have a bucket list of things you want to do?
No, I've done everything I needed to do, and I just take one day at a time. I'm surprised every morning when I wake up because I have coronary vascular disease, and I'm living on borrowed time. My father died way before this year, and so I had no expectation of living this long.
Well, I'm certainly glad you did, so that we could have this conversation for many other reasons, and for our viewers to join us.
Thank you.
And learning more about Bruce Strickland.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bruce.
You're welcome.
Please tune in again to watch future episodes of Front Porch Conversations here at Advent Christian Village.